Hello and welcome to another episode of the Purple Theory podcast. I'm your host, Parker Fleming, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and friend, Grant McGalliard. Grant, we're live on YouTube, man. Week 3 of the previews. How's it going?
It is going great, Parker. I have a question for you. If that's okay. It has
Please,
been.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. It has been 2 weeks since we've last talked. My question is, what is the best piece of media you have consumed over the last 2 weeks?
Best piece of media. Okay, this is going to sound like total nonsense, but I can't remember the director's name, but all right, so this is a classic example of, to tell you that story, I got to tell you this story, like the Ron White thing, right? Adam Driver. All I know about Adam Driver before like 2 weeks ago is that Adam Driver is Kylo Ren in the Star Wars films. And I did not appreciate the Star Wars films and thought that he was kind of a weirdo in those films, and I didn't think he was good.
Correct.
Adam Driver is actually like low-key an awesome actor. And he was in this movie called Patterson.
Okay.
Which is it, and the director's like a funky dude who has a bunch of like weird movies that people like, and I'm not going to remember his name, but it's like a very boring movie, but it's like about poetry, and it's kind of like this just repetitive thing. He's like a bus driver in Patterson, New Jersey, and he goes to the bar every night, and like it was just very like, it was good. It was tightly wound. It was simple, and I really, really appreciated it. I watched it and I just loved it. The guy who plays Chidi, William Harper Jackson, maybe I think is his name, is in it. You would recognize the bartender. It was just a very good movie. It made me think. It made me, it was a little bit emotionally deep, and it's not something I would have watched, but I was just tired but like too tired to sleep. And I Googled best movies on Amazon, and it came up like number 5. And I was like, you know what? Let's just commit and do it. And I loved it. It was great.
All right. I love that for you. By the way, you will recognize the bartender is an offensive thing to say to an Irishman. I'm just going to tell you right now. That is a slur, and I don't like
it. If my beard was any other color, I would accept that and apologize. But wait, no, the bartender is it's frick, I'm Googling it right now. Give me a second. It's
No, this is good audio.
No, it really is. Barry Shabaka Henley, and the bartender's name is Doc. Like, this guy. I'm gonna like send you the picture of him. Like you know who he is. Well, you gotta copy the link, copy the image.
I will, while you're doing that, put in a plug. If you're listening to this and you haven't watched Succession, watch it. The finale is one of the best things I've ever seen in my entire life. Oh my God.
Tell me you're a journalism major without telling me you're a journalist.
I'm the eldest boy. I also want to give a plug. I reread Hunter S. Thompson's Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. It holds up. That's all I'm going to say.
Is that the Johnny Depp movie?
That is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh, okay. I'm sending you a picture of the guy. You know who this guy is.
It is weird that Benicio del Toro did Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas with Johnny Depp. But
is it weird or is it awesome?
Weird. He should not have done that movie. Oh, yeah. I've seen this guy before. Yeah.
Right. You know who he is.
Yeah.
It's a very good movie. I would recommend it. I think it's like a very nice kind of like off-season watch. It's very relaxing. And
here's the question. Do you think Adam Driver's attractive? Because I know a lot of women are like, oh, Adam, like, I have no problem saying that men are handsome. I don't get Adam Driver. I really don't.
He's
the same nose I do, and it's not good.
I think you're just mad he's taller than you, is frankly what's happening here.
That's not true.
I've Googled it. I know the Adam Driver.
Unless he's 6'5", he's not.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of like who's like an ideal for me, or I'm like, okay, like all right, Orlando Bloom, Lord of the Rings, right? Viggo Mortensen, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
The guy who plays Gimli. The guy who plays Gimli, Lord of the Rings. Any of those dudes, right? Like the peak of male attractiveness, right? I don't think Adam Driver rates on the same scale as that. I think that he is tall and he is distinctive and he appears emotionally deep. And that's what kind of constitutes the attract. So I think he gets the attractive label because of that like mystery. Because his face is weird, right?
Yeah,
but it's not like ugly weird. It's not like Forrest Whitaker weird, but it's distinctive.
Okay, I don't know why we needed to take a shot at Forrest Whitaker, but sure.
No, I'm saying Forrest Whitaker, handsome man, has a weird face.
Yeah, he's got a weird eye.
He's got the eye thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I Justin Timberlake and Usher have always been the two dudes. I'm like, oh, these guys are the peak of male attractiveness. But yeah, I don't know. Adam Driver's just never done it for me, man. I can't relate. This is taking a weird turn.
What's the best piece of media? Were you going to say Succession?
Yeah, Succession. And then
have you watched
Fear and Loathing in 72? Yeah.
Have you watched Shrinking on Apple TV?
No, but I've heard it's good. It's the same people that made Ted Lasso, right?
Well, it's Bill Lawrence who made like Scrubs and friggin' everything. But it's Jason Segel and Harrison Ford and like this amazing actress who I don't know. You don't like Jason Segel?
I really don't like Jason Segel.
Is it because he played David Foster Wallace? It's because he played David Foster Wallace.
No, I actually liked him in playing David Foster Wallace. I don't like him in anything else that he's done. And I also don't like Scrubs because I don't like Zach Braff. So
This is that Family Guy scene where they're like all drowning and Peter's like, I didn't like The Godfather. It presumes upon itself.
To be fair, The Godfather does presume upon itself.
I think Shrinking is like a very good TV show.
Okay. I'll give it a shot.
That we've consumed that. I also watched Severance, the first season, which seems like the writers strike and some like interpersonal fighting means that I think season 2 is never going to happen. But it's Adam Scott, and it's kind of cursed. I thought it was a comedy because of Adam Scott, and so the first time I watched it, I was like, "What the f?" And then I went back because I watched it on the plane when I went to Atlanta, and it was pretty good. It's kind of it's messed up. It's one of those shows just like, oh man, what the hell is going on here? You know?
Speaking of handsome men, not Adam Scott, the actor, Adam Scott, the golfer. Want to throw him in there in terms of just,
I don't know.
He's a handsome fella. Poorly dressed. It's like he dresses poorly just to bring himself down for the rest of us, which I appreciate, but very handsome man. We have lost.
Adam Scott's a goofball with a good smile. You got bad taste in men. Okay, we need a third party expert before we start ranking people.
We need to talk about football. I want to give a shout out real quick to noted listener, noted relative of the podcast, Will, who coined the term for Iowa State's quarterback room last week, macho and lefty, which I think is fantastic.
Can we clear the air on that? Because I don't like to break news. But our Iowa State preview is going to be pretty friggin' outdated pretty soon.
Yeah.
Let the reader understand Iowa State's backfield is not going to look like what you think it is. Grant, conversely, have you heard any stories about athletes in Iowa betting on sports recently?
If I were a betting man, I would say that Iowa State's quarterback room is going to be very different.
I don't like to give out free advice, but if you haven't gotten an Iowa State under, you're behind the game, I think, is the move there.
Yeah, it's not great. But Macho and Lefty is fantastic. Parker.
Macho and Lefty is very, very funny. I think last year we were calling it Uncle Rico. And the fact that they have this 6, 7, I literally think on the preview last year, we were like, if Hunter Deckers cannot be Uncle Rico, they're going to be fine. And I was wrong about that because he really wasn't Uncle Rico last year. They were not fine, not because of him. But yeah, I mean, having a 6'10", 300-pound monster back there and then Hunter Deckers is very Macho and Lefty is very funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Parker, this week we have to talk about the TCU Horned Frogs.
Yeah. Man, what a season. Can we just talk about that for a second? Not as fans, just as appreciators of college football. This team had a malaise for the last freaking 5 years, where it was since Kenny Hill's 2017 campaign. It was just my God, what is going on here? And with basically the same players from the 2021 campaign, which was one of the most depressing football seasons I can remember
in recent memory.
They brought in a couple key transfers, and they stayed healthy, got the right bounces, and went 12-0, won a playoff game. Played for a national championship. I think it's arguable whether they actually showed up and played for the national championship, but they certainly were invited to the game.
Yeah, they participated in the loosest sense of the word. I think for the first 15 minutes of real time, it was anybody's game in that national championship. But they straight up like beat the hell out of Michigan in the college football semifinal. They never trailed in that game. They kind of showed like what the apotheosis of Sonny Dykes' football team could be against Michigan.
Do you know the last time that TCU went undefeated in conference?
Would have been Mountain West.
2011, last year in the Mountain West, they went 7-0.
Yeah.
That was the year they lost to both SMU and Boise State, or they beat Boise State in the bowl game. That was the year that they not in the bowl game, just in Boise. That was the year they lost to Baylor and SMU. And that was the first year that I knew that I had a future in being a college football hater, because I distinctly remember like on campus, people getting pissed at me for a Facebook post where I was like, TCU is not going to the BCS. They do not deserve it. They lost to Baylor and SMU. It doesn't matter that they beat the shit out of Mountain West teams. And I had like people I knew in person in the friggin' engineering building while I was trying to study coming up and being like, what are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, this is probably my life for the rest of my life right here.
So that was the year after the Rose Bowl. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That was the Casey Paul Hall year. They played Fresno in the Louisiana Tech in the Poinsettia Bowl, I think, and they won it. And they were very good, but they also played like an extremely shit schedule that year. I think that was I'm pulling it up right here because it's important. So it's like at Baylor, it was like 48-50 back and forth. Like TCU made a comeback, but then Baylor kicked field goal at the end. And then SMU was 33-40, just kind of a shit game. But their other opponents were like Air Force, Louisiana Monroe, San Diego State, New Mexico, BYU, Wyoming, Colorado State, UNLV, Louisiana Tech in the bowl game. And then at Boise State, when Boise State was ranked 5, they won 36-35. Shout out to Kyle Brotzman. But they played nobody. They played 3 teams all year and went 1-2 against those teams.
Did you know Terry Bradshaw went to Louisiana Tech?
I've heard rumors about that, but I haven't been able to confirm. Do you know that Skip Holtz and Jamar Smith is like a USFL dynasty continuing on from their Louisiana Tech days? He's hurt this year, so he's not playing. But they're kind of like, let's run it back. So
I like that. Let's run it back. Yeah, a historic season for TCU last year. Obviously, Max Duggan finishing second in the Heisman. You and I don't have to. There is enough literature on our behalf to spell out how special that was. If you would like to add more to it, please let me.
Have we appropriately taken the victory lap here? Because again, like as I think both of us in the last 4 years have taken a lot of flack specifically about Max Duggan and about other things. I think that like Gary Patterson and I argued about Max Duggan, and I was saying things like, why would you not change the offense to maximize his strengths? Why would you run it 50 times and pass it 11 times against the shitty Kansas team and not try to get him reps in a real game? And arguing about it. I even think about like solid verbal was like, I went on there and talked about TC season, and they were like, were you surprised? Like, how did it feel to like be this, Max Duggan coming out of nowhere? And I was like, my brothers in Christ, I don't think you know who you're talking to right now in terms of defending Duggan. It's just very nice to be like, I'm like very fine to flex and be like, Grant, we very much know ball. Like we saw the spark in Max Duggan. We knew like if the circumstances around him are fine, he's going to be a great quarterback. And like, by God, he was a great quarterback this year.
Yeah. He all he needed was, and this sounds like a lot, so bear with me because I'm not trying to bury him with faint praise. He needed an offensive line that had an actual coach, which he didn't have for the first 3 years. He needed wide receivers that were solid, and really QJ came into his own in 2022. And he needed an offensive coordinator that would allow him to make the throws that he was good at making, which are short to mid, over the field, deep balls down the sideline on occasion. That's it. And he didn't need to be trusted to run the ball all the time. But obviously we saw against Kansas State, especially in the Big 12 championship game, he's willing to make those runs. He just needed time to sit in the pocket, make throws. And damn if he didn't.
And honestly, like it's kind of a burn the ship situation because like I mean with Morris being hurt early on, it was like there is no recourse. Like Sonny Dykes was not going to start Sam Jackson if Max sucked. It was like, dude, we just got to let you make mistakes and grow and everything. And like Max Duggan has never before 2022 had that in his career where there was like no consequences for trying to be good and failing. Yeah. Right? Like, think about that. It was like, oh, we're going to put Alex Delton in if you screw this up. Or like, oh, you were going to, Matt Downing's going to start a game and like all this nonsense. And this is like the first year where they just didn't have that. There wasn't like, there was no alternative.
Michael Collins is not walking through that door. You know what I mean?
Okay. All right. Freaking Michael Collins had an 88 QBR against Kansas. It wasn't his fault.
It was not his fault.
Free boozy.
free my mans. Unfortunately, Parker, things have changed, and we are no longer a TCU podcast. So we will get to that in a minute. But do you want to give the quick rundown? We can work through this together. TCU's 2022 year, right? So let's go through 12-0 regular season. First undefeated season since 2010, which was the Rose Bowl year. Lost the Big 12 title game to Kansas State in overtime. Beat Michigan at the scores 51-45 in the semifinal. Then the Georgia game occurred, which is something that I have blocked out from my memory. But it happened.
I don't know that anyone had any other expectations that like Georgia was going to beat them, and then Georgia just didn't stop. Like that's the first time that we've seen Georgia against an opponent they vastly outclass, where at halftime they didn't say, you know what, F it, we're going home.
No, it was
and why would they, right? Like,
yeah, it was stop, he's already dead.
Yeah,
but they just kept going. But TCU was 9-0, first in the Big 12, first undefeated conference record, like you said, since 2011 in the Mountain West. First season with a conference win percentage over 60% since 2017, which I think was the Alamo Bowl year when they beat Stanford in the Alamo Bowl. There were a lot of one-score wins in this season. 42-34 over SMU, 38-31 over Kansas, 43-40 in double overtime against Oklahoma State, 17-10 at Texas, which really should have been a two-score win, but that fumble was kind of an odd occurrence. 29-28 at Baylor, and then, of course, the Michigan game. So not a dominant undefeated team, but a team that found a lot of ways to win through sheer force of will or luck or whatever you want to call it. But they they found a way.
What I thought was really interesting about this team was actually their point differential on the season was plus 7.5, right? Mm-hmm. Which was actually 30th behind Kansas State, behind UCLA, behind Louisville, behind Oregon, just in front of Troy, South Alabama, and Central Florida. But if you break that down into home and away, they were plus 20.4 at home, plus 0.3 away. But Grant, that plus 20.4 at home includes a 59-17 beatdown of Tarleton State. So you take that away on the season, that's what, 42 points divided across 7 home games. Doing some math there in my head. That's 7 times 6. And so you pulled on 6 points. They were plus 1.5 in scoring margin at home. Like it was and that includes an Iowa State blowout. Like except for 2 blowouts, this was a like live and die on the margin team, which we see in the Big 12 every year. And TCU, they did something amazing. They stayed healthy and they won 10 games down the stretch. I don't even know if it's that they stayed healthy because like Quentin Johnson was out, Kendre Miller was out, Darius Davis was out, Tate Barber was out. They were rotating guys through, but they didn't have an injury to like a major position that they couldn't deal with it against an opponent. They didn't have a moment where like Kansas State was down to their 3rd string quarterback or Oklahoma lost Dylan Gabriel like against TCU. They didn't have a moment like that. And just kind of crazy that the margins bounced up that way. But like for a Big 12 school that recruits in the 20s to 30s, I mean, this is best case scenario. You hope for a season like this where you're good enough and then you get lucky enough to stay healthy and then magic happens, right?
Yes. And they also had, and this doesn't make a hill of beans in terms of on-field performance, but they had the narrative behind them in terms of, hey, this is fresh air. This is Sonny Dykes' first year. This is a new system, a new, coordinator group. And all of that kind of coincided. And it was Max's senior year. So they had this national sort of push behind them to be like, hey, you know what? Why not TCU? And they kept effing doing it. And that was the weirdest part as someone who followed the team, obviously, and was rooting for him. It felt like every single win was a surprise, even though they were ranked ahead of pretty much every team they beat. Every single win felt like, oh, this is gravy. This is icing on the cake. This is just, something new. After, you said, years of malaise, it was opening the windows and letting fresh air in.
Yeah, and how much should we talk about like vibes last year changing, where it was just like fans got to go to spring practice and just like it felt okay to be a TCU fan, which I think like that was entirely different, and they like very clearly needed someone who was like, again, I don't mean this as the slight to Gary Patterson's career, but I do mean it as a slight to his like 2019 through 2021. Like they needed somebody who was interested in running a college football program day to day. And they hadn't had that, and they finally got that, and that made a lot of difference and set them up for this. But I mean, you look at this schedule, Grant. I mean, a Colorado game where they were scored 6 points in the first half against a terrible, terrible team, looked absolutely feckless, needed a punt return to jive things. An SMU game where they ended up winning by one score. SMU had the ball, with a touchdown towards the end there.
I'll say that game wasn't as close as the score indicated.
I think that's fair to say. I think sequentially, like SMU didn't fall apart. And so that's something certainly concerning. The Oklahoma game, you looked at that like, okay, TCU got up early. What the heck's happening? Maybe they're going to come back. And then there was an injury to Gabriel. It didn't happen. But then Kansas, 1-score game that was back and forth. Oklahoma State, 2-score touchdown at two scores at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Kansas State, 3-score lead in the first half. West Virginia, they were up by 3 and only scored down that last play on some complete nonsense. There, Texas Tech throwing the kitchen sink in the run game earlier. Baron Morton's hurt. Tyler Shuck's hurt. Kind of helps them out. Texas, complete nail biter of a game, back and forth, very, very thin margins. Baylor with the bazooka, and then finally a breath of fresh air against Iowa State, where the motivation differential was certainly very high when Iowa State when 4-7 Iowa State came into Fort Worth. That game, and then you look at the Kansas State game where it was basically like we've played 11 straight games, there's only so much you can do, and you get to overtime, and then they get healthy, they win 55-41, absolute heart attack against Michigan. The margins this entire season were so thin, and it's in being consistent with saying like Baylor in 2021 got some bounces, Iowa in 2020 got some bounces, TCU absolutely got some bounces. That doesn't, in the same way, it doesn't take anything away from Baylor or Iowa State seasons the last 2 years. It is saying like this is what happens to the good teams in the Big 12 is like they're healthy, they're past a sufficient threshold of being good, and they get the bounces, they get the breaks, and TCU got it and they took advantage of it this year. But it certainly was like the narrowest of margins.
Yeah. And there is something, I think, and then after this, we'll get into sort of the nuts and bolts. There is something to making your own luck, right? And I think Dykes bringing in that new group of coordinators, bringing in a new attitude, and the group of players that he had were able to sort of, hey, listen, we're getting all the bounces. Let's freaking take advantage of it. And there are a lot of teams that get a lot of bounces and they don't. And so I don't want to, attach any sort of mysticism or speciality to last year's TCU team, but they were able to take advantage of those lucky bounces. And that's not nothing.
Yes, I think absolutely. And like you think about things like the bazooka in Baylor, in the Baylor game, you think about them scoring at the half against SMU, stuff where they just hadn't,
they didn't
in the
do
past,
that.
They hadn't been that aggressive.
Yeah, they didn't do that in 2019. That would not have happened.
You think about the West Virginia game where people booed because TCU lined up like they were going to go for it and call timeouts.
Parker, do you have any advanced stats, or do you just want to get to cruising and talking?
No, we can get some advanced stats there. So TCU 19th in EPA per play margin, which for someone who played in the national championship is pretty low, but again, low margins right there. 17th on offense, 50th on defense. So much better on the offensive side of the ball, and I think just good enough on defense. Offense was very interesting, kind of mixed bag, because their EPA was high, 17th, but their success rate was only 55th. And that's kind of interesting when you look at their splits. They were 83rd in passing success rate, only 37.4 passing success rate, but they were 26th in rushing success rate. So very much kind of like perversely almost the ideal like Gary Patterson offense, where like they can run the ball very well and they have the deep threat. But it's kind of like if you try to run the ball and then hope for the deep threat, you're never going to get it. But if you have the deep threat, then you can run the ball. And so certainly a kind of correlation causation issue there. On defense, 51st in success rate. So success rate and EPA were about the same. They got beat. It wasn't like they were only giving up big plays. They gave up chunk plays. They gave up successful plays. 47th in success rate, 63rd in rush rate. Interestingly enough, like their echo ratio kind of game control was 16th in the nation, 56.1. They generated a quality possession on its 16th highest rate on offense, but they allowed it at the 43rd highest rate on defense. So certainly we're giving up a lot of possessions. I think the offense being good and kind of minimizing turnovers really helped. As we talk about the defense, we'll talk about field position. They were 17th in starting field position, 27.5. So I think that really helped the defense that wasn't amazing, especially against the pass, and had some obvious weaknesses, but because they weren't put in these bad positions by a limited offense, was able to kind of rise above and do a little bit better there. So a kind of a campaign, again, what you would think of an air raid team, right? Offensive forward and very strong, but not to, not as bad on the defensive side of the ball as they had been last year, for instance, where they gave up 200 yards to anyone with a pulse.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is kind of bringing in a new system to where, listen, Patterson's 4-2-5 was outstanding in its heyday, but I think enough tape existed to where, hey, we know we're playing TCU. This is how we counter the 4-2-5, right? TCU brought in Joe Gillespie, and I think the 3-3-5 he brought in gave TCU's defense a fresh look and just sort of didn't allow teams to have an automatic game plan when playing TCU. So I think a little bit of turnover there kind of helped them on the defensive end, even when TCU was kind of weaker at some position groups than others. I want to talk about Cruton real quick. And this does not include the transfer portal. I say that. So TCU's 2023 class, 24th high school recruiting, 20th composite with transfers. That's third in the Big 12. And we'll get to the transfers in a minute. That's 8 4-stars. One, there's a wide receiver, cornerback, a safety. So safety, Radon Fontenette. Parker, do you know what Brazosport High School in Freeport, Texas? Do you know what their mascot is?
I'm sorry, Rayon Fortinet?
Radon, as in the
Radon Fortinet. Interesting. That's a name. That's pretty good. That's pretty good name.
Pretty good.
Brazosport, Texas. Where are they? Sorry.
They're in Freeport, Texas. 45 minutes from my house. Used to be in Bay City's district.
I have no idea. I can't even come up with. I want to do like I don't know, crayfish or something.
Listen, that'd be cool if they were. They're the exporters.
Oh.
Yeah, the Brazosport exportors.
Is that like a ship is their logo or something?
No, it's almost like a Commodore is their logo. A dude who exports things is their emblem. There is a good mix of Texas and Cali kids. I don't think Dykes can maintain the Texas to Louisiana pipeline that Patterson had. For all of Patterson's faults, he was very good at recruiting, especially in like Alexandria, Louisiana, places like that, and pulling kids out of that state. I don't know if Sonny has that pull, but I think he is probably more in tune with the Cali kids from his time in Berkeley. So interesting mix. There is a good JUCO class. I love Channing Canada. I'm going to make so many cross-Canadian ragweed jokes this season. Just prepare for that, but we'll get to that later. But that is the recruiting rundown.
Yeah, I think again one of TCU's better classes. For a while, Grant, TCU was like very clearly the third in the conference. It was like, and it's still that way with excuse me, it's still that way with like team talent composite because it was so good for a while. But I think 2021 and 2022 were like the first 2 years where TCU was consecutively not third in the conference because it was like Oklahoma, Texas, big jump, TCU, big jump, everyone else. And they got beat out for a couple of years. And it seems like they're back to that third, which puts you again in the new Big 12 on pace to be first, which I think if the Big 12 is going to become the AAC plus, which kind of looks like it's going to happen, they're going to invite Memphis.
Come on. Let's not denigrate.
Well, no, like AAC plus is still Power 5. I'm not saying like whatever, like they're going to invite Memphis, they're going to invite one other. We'll see what the Pac-12 schools do. But like the TCU could be in a position to have the most talented roster every year in this conference. And so top 25 class, I think is a very easy threshold for TCU to cross. What's interesting about that is they are returning 52% of their total production, which is 118th in the nation. 33%.
Hey, can I stop you real quick?
Oh, please.
No, I'm so sorry. Do you find it weird that Oklahoma State doesn't recruit better? Like, we'll get to that in the Oklahoma State preview, but I always think that they should be up there with TCU in that. Okay.
No. I think that my theory on that is that Mike Gundy is very particular.
Okay.
And I believe that Mike Gundy is an individual who really, and he does this well. So I'm not necessarily knocking him for it, but I think Mike Gundy is like those are your ratings, not our rating. You know how Gary Patterson was like, those are your stars, not our stars.
Yeah.
I think Gundy is that to the extreme of like, I'm going to find this random ass 2-star wide receiver and show you that you were wrong about him. I think he likes that.
Okay. Fair enough. I always think about the talent that Oklahoma State produces that translates to the NFL, which is a bad way to evaluate talent for college football, but I'm always surprised they're not higher. Anyway, Parker, please continue on the offensive stats. I apologize. That was just
no, you're totally fine. 52% returning production, 33%. That's 118th in the nation. 33% returning production on offense. That's 130th in the nation.
Not good.
The names I'm going to read here in a second are insane. And then only 71% on defense, but that is 40th in the nation. So that's at least not a disaster. We'll talk about some of the key losses there, but man, listen to the guys they lose on. If you want to just go ahead and dive in on the offensive side, I think is where we'll go here. Quentin Johnson, wide receiver 1, Steve Avila, guard number 1, Kendre Miller, running back number 1, Darius Davis, key wide receiver, Max Duggan, quarterback, Tay Barber, key wide receiver, Imari DeMercado, wide receiver number 2, Alan Ali played center on the offensive line there. So that's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 key starters that TCU has lost. And just a really, really hard situation for TCU. And it's not a hard situation in the sense that like they've done anything wrong. It's just like, this is what happens, especially with the COVID year. You get a bunch of 5th and 6th year guys, you're really good for a year, and then they're all gone at the same time. And that's kind of what happens here with the COVID year is like your 6th and 5th and 4th year guys are all kind of compressed and you lose a lot more. You're at the top of your development cycle. You're going to have to rebuild. That's going to have to happen.
Yeah, it's I don't know if this year, 2023, is going to be the bottom of the cycle for TCU. I think next year is going to be a really, really tough year for TCU. This is sort of like a continuation, keep your head above the water type of season. We'll get to that in a minute. But losing all those guys that were stars on a team that made the college football championship game is not necessarily ideal.
But it is like, I mean, it's cost of doing business, right? I think is really the key there.
No TCU fan would trade last year for anything. Like, whatever. You lose 8 guys, fine.
It's just kind of what happens there. I think if you look at like their recruiting as well, they feel really good about some of these guys on offense. This Haas kid out of Alito got invited to the Elite 11 and looks like a pretty good kid. Looks like one of those classic examples of just like doesn't have the physical stats to be rated like a 5-star, but like is electric enough that he's going to get bumped up to a 4-star. So like they have their QB of the future coming in, even as they, I will say, frankly, missed on a couple of guys they thought they had. And felt like a little bit of disaster there. They lost Sam Jackson. The quarterback room does look a little thin right now. But they do feel like they've got some pieces in the future to kind of build, and Chandler Morris has a couple more years, so there'll be some continuity. But yeah, it is going to be a couple seasons of finding themselves again. I think we said very soberly last year, like this is proof of concept that Sonny Dykes with the perfect roster can take this team to its ceiling. The question is remained to be answered: can he build this perfect roster?
Right. Two things there. One, did you know Chandler Morris is listed as a sophomore?
So Chandler Morris what recruiting class was he?
I feel like it was 2020, maybe.
I think he transferred to TCU, didn't he?
Well, obviously he transferred to TCU, but the guy's like my age. He is an old man. I also want to give a shout out to a quarterback that transferred in the offseason this year. Shout out Alexander Hanig, man. Noted German.
Dude.
Alex, if you're listening, hope you're good, dude.
Where did he landed at UConn, correct? I think he's going to play tight end.
Yeah.
He might get some reps, man. That's good for him. I'm glad to see that.
I'm glad for that guy.
Chandler Morris, class of 2020, transferred in 2021. And so he's freshman in 2020, COVID year. So freshman in 2021, redshirted injury in 2022, is a sophomore in 2023. Fourth year out of college, fourth year out of high school, but he's a sophomore.
Listen, the game he played at Highland Park in the championship game is one of the coolest high school football games I've ever seen. Chandler Morris, he's cool. I'm with him. Parker, let's get this out of the way. We're not going to spend too much time on it. We did a whole episode about it. The coordinator on offense. So TCU loses Garrett Riley, and it loses Garrett's and Lincoln Riley's trademark counter run and spread passing scheme. I swear to God, for a brief minute, when I was researching this and kind of compiling our sheet, I forgot who TCU's new offensive coordinator was. I just put it out of my mind. But TCU's offensive coordinator is Kendall Briles. And you can go listen to the episode called So Long and Thanks for All the Fish and hear me and Parker talk about it. And that is why we are not a TCU-centric podcast anymore. If it's fine with you, I don't want to put anything on you. I think we just talk about TCU football in terms of pure scheme, whatever, not overlooking the Briles thing. We've said our piece. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I don't have the energy. I don't have the energy.
I have three things on that. One, I agree. I don't have the energy because like it's the stupidest. It's stupid. It's just an absolute show your ass move. Two, I think it's really funny that like in Arkansas was going to play TCU in the 2020 bowl before Gary canceled it because they didn't think they were having defensive players and he didn't want to get beat. And I wrote a post on the Purple Theory newsletter. Grant, remember when we used to write things?
Yeah.
Called Separating Art from the Artist, and was basically like, hey, bad person, let's just talk about what they're going to do on offense. And I think I stand by a lot of that because it is a good way to understand their offense and not do all that. And again, like there's Grant, I'm not going to waste my breath trying to convince 19-year-olds with burner accounts like on Twitter. Like who gives a shit, right? I don't care. Three, I will say TCU got played so hard by Jimmy Sexton to hire Kendall Briles that it's embarrassing. Like this is embarrassing on multiple levels because what happened is Sexton called Mississippi State, said, hey, think our boy's interested. You guys need an OC. There's a lot of changeover. He'd come over. They offered a bunch. He came back to Arkansas, ponied up a ton. And at that point, Sam Pittman at Arkansas called Dan Enos and said, hey, might have an opening. Are you interested? And Dan said, yeah, that'd be great. Would love to come work with you again. I think that'd be really good. So they got Kendall back. They gave him a couple more dollars. Sexton's not content with that. Kendall's not content with that. They call TCU and say, hey, man, think Kendall might be interested. Heard Garrett's going to go to A&M or something, right? Like, because this was happening from what we were hearing. This was talked about before the national championship.
Yeah. Which I will say is the normal course of events.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But so Jimmy Sexton calls and says, hey, think my guy's interested in this opening. What can you offer him? TCU makes him an offer. And Jimmy Sexton goes back to Arkansas and says, can you match it? And Sam Pittman says, I've already called Dan. You got to move on. And that's not me speculating. That is reported that Sam Pittman said, nope, not playing this dance anymore. Get out of here. And so TCU ended up overpaying for a guy that they really didn't want to keep around and whose time was limited. And Arkansas has been frustrated by the red zone struggles. And so it's not like the NFL where it's like salary cap money. It's not my money. I don't donate to TCU. But it is something where it's like TCU got played here in a little bit of how they paid for this guy. So I think that's unfortunate and kind of bad optics, especially when you combine it with like who they got played for. And so I don't think we need to dwell anymore. I think the final thing to say is the fact that they continue to hire staffers from that era of Baylor shows just like a blatant disregard for any kind of social nuance at all. It's dumb. It's very dumb. And I think there's plenty of people you could have hired to run that exact same offense with the exact same level of competence without doing something this stupid.
Yes.
Okay. Cut me off.
No, you're fine. No,
no, I'm serious. I'm saying just don't let me keep going because I can keep it's bewildering.
I'm also mad. I just don't want to waste breath because it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
But so central tenets of the offense, you're replacing. Come on, football. Come on, here we go.
We want to run the ball. I want to line up and I'm going to spread you out. And if you put 6 guys in the box, hand it off every time. Going to happen. I think that
4-1 zone gap at Arkansas under
yes.
The Bryles run game is well established, but also dynamic. So
watch, half of the receivers aren't going to do anything on a given play, right?
Nope.
It's very much like we're going to go to grass, basketball on grass. This is where that originated. He's built it up for some RPO stuff. He learned some stuff from Lane Kiffin. They want to RPO. I do think that something that I've tried to learn a little bit about is how much of the quarterback run game at Arkansas was the offensive design and how much of it was this isn't working and KJ Jefferson is athletic as hell. And so he's going to make something happen.
Yeah.
Grant, this might kill our audio. You're frozen to me. I don't know if you're frozen.
No, that's fine. I can hear you. You can hear me. You're fine.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. If you want to turn off your camera, turn it back on, see what happens. But yeah. So a lot of that is going to be, we want to line up. We're going to go open space. We want to run fast. We want to run the ball. And we're going to make you stop us run the ball. So that's going to be very in line with TCU's identity. We're going to see a lot less kind of layering and concept routes. We're going to see a lot more point throws, catch the ball, fall down, get up, run again. And I think a lot of that is going to be a little bit different from TCU because the play is not going to be like a quarterback extends it and makes something happen. It's going to be if the quarterback extends it, something's gone very wrong and we're relying on a very small person to potentially put himself in a lot of conflict to make something happen there. So it's going to be a little different there. I don't know. Did you watch the spring game, Grant?
No, I didn't put myself through that. No.
Yeah, I just went back and kind of skimmed through it. I tried to watch most of the Big 12 spring games that were there, and spring games are only what they are. But it looked extremely vanilla. It looked like they hadn't installed the full offense, and it looked like everything that they talked about in the press conferences was not what I think of Chandler Morris being good at. They were talking about like his accuracy downfield and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if he has that great of an arm. Like his mobility is great, but I don't know he's great throwing on the run. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they take their perception of Morris with what I believe the reality of Morris is shown in kind of his development and how they squeeze something out of that.
So can I ask you a question? And I don't want to put you on the spot, and you can tell me if you don't have a good answer or whatever. What do you think Morris's skill set is?
Yeah, I think Morris is extremely elusive. I think Morris is a very quick thinker. I think Morris is a faster processor than Max Duggan. And I think that's why Sonny Dykes liked him more.
Yep.
I think that Morris can go, nope, not there, going to throw it here. And Duggan, because he has such a threat with his legs and wants to be that like bodied runner, is a little bit slower to say, okay, that's not there. Let me see if this other one's going to develop. Oh, okay, I can run. Chandler is like, I have to run right now or I have to get rid of the ball. So I think he's going to get rid of the ball quickly. I think in terms of the intermediate game, I think he will be a little bit more accurate and faster processor. That opens up your RPO game to be a little bit spicier than what TCU was able to do under Max Duggan. And I think that he's shiftier than Max Duggan. I don't think he's straight line faster. I don't think he's a better runner, but I do think in terms of the pocket collapsing and him kind of eluding, he might be able to extend plays doing that and find guys underneath. I think we'll see a lot of like John Paul Richardson runs a drag. Morris gets out of something, runs around for a little bit. JPR goes back. He throws 3-yard completion that goes for 20 yards because JPR runs. Like a lot of kind of like broken play offense, I think, is what Morris brings.
Okay. I like that. So let's go ahead. Let's give a rating. Chandler has a lot of good tools. I agree with you in terms of the different tools that he brings to this offense, and he can extend plays. I still think he's a downgrade from Max, just in terms of Max's comfortability and his. I love him. I don't know. I have Chandler rated as a 9 out of 15.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's where I have them. A little bit of that is just like they brought in Chance Nolan, and then it's Josh Hoover. And Morris isn't the most durable guy. He's not the most stout guy. He's gonna run some. So like if he gets hurt, we're talking heartbeats away from Chance Nolan running your offense. And God love the Oregon State Beavers, but if you get beat out by a guy named Gulbranson, you got some problems, right?
I'm trying to rate this. You know, we had this lovely spreadsheet where we can kind of rate each team relative to the teams that we've rated before. So, for example, I rated Jalen Daniels at Kansas as an 11. I have Hunter Deckers as an 8. I have Chandler as a 9. All right, so I think that's kind of where he fits in the ecosystem.
Interesting. Okay, I'm doing this by rooms though, so I have like Kansas's room 12.
Well, rooms.
And then I have Iowa State's room 10 because I really like that big kid. And then I have TCU's room 9 just because I feel like the drop off of like, sure, if Chandler can be healthy all year, going to be a fine room, but like I'm worried about that. I think that's a legitimate concern.
I can't recall the big kid's name, and all they want us to do for the rest of this podcast is just call him the big kid. Even when Casino goes out, I'm just going to call him the big kid. That's all I care about. Yeah.
Biggin. I'm actually, okay, I looked at the sheet. I had a 10 here. So I'm going to call it a 10.
Oh, okay.
I got a 10 on there. Yep.
All right. Fair enough.
Which, again, is a prior. Like, Morris plays 3 games and shows that he's not going to take 40 hits a game. Boom, we're going up to 12 almost 100%. Immediately. Sure.
If he's throwing darts and he's commanding the middle of the field, absolutely.
If what we've heard about Chandler Morris shows up on the field, 12. Easy. Up there with Jalen Daniels, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Talk about the running back room. So Kendre Miller and Mario DiMercato, we talked about, they're gone. Yikes. So Parker, they combined for 345 attempts. That's 69%.
That is a lot of attempts. Nice.
Also, nice. Thank you. Of total rushing attempts. 2,080 yards. That's 66% of TCU's rushing yards, and 23 TDs, which is 60% of TCU's total rushing touchdowns. You add in Duggan leaving, he was a potent running threat, and Parker, this is a full rebuild, right? You do bring back Imani Bailey, obvious next man up. Okay, 5'9", 200. Brick shit house?
No, not heavy enough.
Okay. Can I give you fire hydrant? Spark plug?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, spark plug, nah. Fire hydrant, yes.
Fire hydrant, okay. Last year, you averaged 8 yards per attempt on 31 carries, 2 touchdowns. That was in spot duty and probably late in games, but he showed flashes. You add in Trey Sanders, who's transferring from Alabama, and Trent Battle, who saw a few snaps last year as well. The running game is going to be different. Last year was a 2-to-1 zone gap split under Garrett Riley. The Kendall Briles offense is a 4-to-1 zone gap split. Miller was an underrated back. Bailey showed a lot of flashes. Sanders is an unknown. He had like 2 season-ending injuries in his first 2 freshman years at Bama, but he was a number 11 prospect in the country and the top back like in the nation coming out of high school. And that was 2019. He's still listed as a junior. He's on the Chandler Morris graduation plan.
Man.
I think this running back room is full of potential, let's say, but maybe undiscovered potential.
I think that's fair. I think that I'm going to be consistent with my running backs don't matter stance here, specifically because like it's only going to matter in so much as like the offensive line is good. And the caliber of guy, like TCU's not going to have like a 5-star game changing dude, regardless of who's blocking. And so all that's going to matter is like, can the offensive line do enough to make these guys fine? So like, I think I think the running back room is generally fine here. I like Battle in the pass game. I think that's a huge benefit. Like how many times, like he comes into the backfield, they run 20 personnel and Battle's running a wheel route, right? Like he's getting the ball. And so to see his role expanded, I'm very interested in this. I think Imani Bailey's very, very shifty, had a good spring, and is a guy who could be pretty good. And if Sanders is healthy, boom, you've got 3 guys who can take reps. That's going to equal 1 really good running back. I think this room is absolutely fine. Not one of my worries at all for TCU. TCU has a long history of taking kind of no-name running backs and saying, you're good enough, we're going to trust you, we're going to build on you. And so I think these guys are absolutely a fine unit, but they're subject to the quality of the offensive line.
Fair enough. I have them as a 7 out of 10 with extreme potential, right? Like 7, I think is the bottom. I think you have them as an 8, which I have an 8. Fine with. Yeah.
8, and same thing. 8 is like very good, right? Like I don't think that if I plucked these guys and put them on any other team, they would be much worse than whatever any team's got. Like they are a fine unit, and TCU's going to run the ball a ton. They're going to run against a light box a ton, which is going to help the offensive line out. And so I think these guys will be plenty fine here.
Yeah. Moving to the wide receiver room, I first off, I just want to talk about the 2 transfers. I am so in on JoJo Earl. I don't think you have any idea. John Paul Richardson, of course, excited to see
John Paul Richardson is not. I was talking to Adam Lunt, friend of the podcast, the other day.
Yeah,
Oklahoma State guy, and we were just talking about how like the key thing with John Paul Richardson that's so cool is like at Oklahoma State he was the guy, and I can call John Paul Richardson a lot of things. I don't know that I can call him the guy. No. I think that when he attracts too much gravity, that's going to be really hard for him to like function. And what he's going to get here is he's going to get a lot of attention elsewhere with like Savion and JoJo potentially on there and some other guys. And so I think that like he's going to thrive in a secondary or tertiary role in a way that like he could not have in a primary role. And that's going to be really, really cool. Like Darius Davis, Tay Barber, he can absolutely be that caliber of guy.
Yeah. The amount of passes John Paul Richardson is going to catch over the middle from Chandler Morris is going to be astounding.
Or like I mentioned earlier, the extended play. Yeah.
The extended play. Yeah. Like I said, the drag right there. But I have him pictured in my mind as the RPO glance route. Just kind of running that slant over the middle where Chandler, can pass it off to Imani Bailey or just look up and see John Paul Richardson open for a 5-yard gain.
I'd be the littlest bit worried about him in conflict, but I think again as a secondary option, he'll be okay.
Well, and then you have that, and then you have JoJo Earl who can do the same thing. I mean, 5'10", 170, but golly, that guy is a stud coming from Alabama.
And if he can stay healthy, if he can kind of turn into what we think he could be on the field, could be an absolute diamond in the rough situation.
Yes.
Little skeptical of drop downs from Alabama. A little skeptical, especially because like Tommy Brockmeyer is on this roster and like has no business being on a roster, and so we know what like there is some context around drop downs from Alabama. But I think Earl had an injury and is healthy now and could potentially play a pretty big role in this offense.
We'll get to Brockmeyer in a minute. Savion Williams. A favorite of the Purple Fury podcast.
Dude.
Just an athlete. Just
has the body, man. Has the body. Got kind of maligned in his development because he like dropped a pass and then they wouldn't go to him again for the game in 2021. But last year, I think, a very ancillary role, but had some good catches in big moments. Should be the number 1 big threat outside guy, right?
Yeah. They're putting him in the QJ role. And he just had he's not going to fulfill it, but that's the role they're putting him in. He only had 1.36 yards per route run on an 8 out of 10.3 last year. For reference, Quentin Johnston was 2.86 on 12.2. Well, I expect that yards per route run to double. He's going to get a lot more. Yeah, he was also running a lot of decoy. Just like, hey,
only 36 targets. Yeah,
he was running. Hey, I'm a big threat, and then they threw it elsewhere. Also know Jared Wiley returns. a favorite of ours as well.
Yeah, and I think used really creatively at times, but really inconsistently. It is almost absurd to me that throughout the entire season, Jared Wiley only had 29 targets, and 8 of those came in the postseason games. That seems like way too low. I would not be surprised if TCU doesn't try to get his target share way up. Wiley on the season last year was at 1.39 yards per route run. I think that's pretty low for what he can be. He is a good blocker. He did block a lot.
Yep.
And he doesn't drop the ball. So a lot of possessions. So especially with new quarterback who's looked rattled before, go to your guy. Look, if I'm prepping for the Colorado game, I'm saying I don't care what we do all season. We're going to go Morris to Wiley like 10 times straight out of the hole exactly. And just get some first downs, right? Like, all right, dude, you can't cover him. Yeah.
Yeah. A Jared Wiley 8-yard curl route is sort of kind of the
big man, go fall down, catch the ball, fall down. Right. We'll be fine. Yeah. So I think that's
Mason Fairchild. Yeah.
And a good blocker there. They bring in the transfer from Minnesota, Dylan Wright, who depth. That's great. They got guys. They really tried to replace. They knew they didn't have the guys there. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Jordan Hudson,
sure.
and how he lost. I think he was kind of like a crown jewel of TCU's recruiting class. Never really found a role. Did have a couple like good pass interference things. And then like one or two late touchdowns, but never really found like, hey, what kind of like, where do you fit into this offense? It never really happened. Looked like he kind of got complacent this spring and got lapped up. Prime change of scenery guy. Like, would TCU have been better off if they had the best version of Jordan Hudson? Absolutely. Is Jordan Hudson ever going to be his best version at TCU? No. I would not be surprised, Grant. Jordan Hudson goes to SMU and becomes one of the American Conference's best receivers, right? Like,
yeah.
But there's just no world where he does that at TCU.
Yeah, 100%. Talented kid. Wish him all the best. Okay, hold on. So I want to get to this. So let's give our grades real quick for the wide receiver room. I have it as a 7 out of 10. Again, with room to grow. You have it as a 10 out of 10. Holy hell!
I love it. I think they've got everything they need. What else do you need out of this wide receiver room?
Okay.
You've got big threat. You've got multiple guys on the inside. And you've got a tight end.
I don't think there's a dominant wide receiver one.
Look, really Savion's going to rise to the occasion. I believe in that.
Yes.
I think that if this passing game struggles because of the wide receivers, I will be shocked.
Okay, that's fair. I want to get to Tommy Brockermeyer because apparently you know something I don't. Let's talk about the offensive line. So TCU loses all the good ones essentially. Alana Lee, Steve Avila. I can't watch Andrew Coker play any more football. So please tell me why Tommy Brockermeyer is not going to start.
This is going to sound absurd.
Okay.
Andrew Coker is going to be fine this year. Okay. Andrew Coker has started. Let's look at how many games. Let's just give you the exact number here.
A lot of games.
Andrew Coker has played so much football. He has 2,200 offensive snaps over the last 4 years.
Right. And 1,100 of them ended in a penalty. So
yes, but 1,100 of them didn't. And I really think that development cycles matter. And I think that physical maturation matters. And I think that like he was coached by a monster for most of those 2,200 snaps. I believe that eternity begins anew each day. I think he can be fine. I think he can be a net neutral, which is his best case scenario.
Okay, fair enough. So tell me, I don't want you to give away anything that you don't feel comfortable saying. What do I not know about Brockermeyer?
He's irreparably hurt and he's not good at football anymore.
Great. So TCU also brings in Willis Patrick from Jackson State.
Hilarious name for a football player.
Just a great name. Wasn't Patrick Willis like a?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Willis Patrick is not a guy.
He is a guy.
I think he's a
D2 All-American last year.
I think. Yeah,
I'm just telling you what the research says.
That's fine.
Parker, I'm trying to find people to play offensive line for TCU.
Congrats, it's you.
So, okay, here's who's returning. Brandon Coleman, left tackle.
Fine.
John Lands at guard is returning.
Dude, I think John Lance is playing center.
Okay, well,
he's playing center in the spring game.
We don't have a center, so that's fine. I don't.
Somebody has to.
Wes Harris is returning.
No, Wes Harris is not on the roster, is he?
I think he is, man. And then Andrew Coker is returning. I think Wes Harris is on the roster. No, he's
dude.
Right.
Wes Harris is like 46 years old.
I know. Yeah, I just assumed because he's been there forever. Okay, so
shout out to Wes Harris breaking his jaw in the middle of the Kansas State game 2020 and finishing the game.
For the record,
that was badass. Shout out to that. That game sucked, but shout out to him.
Shout out to him. Okay, fine. Garrett Hayes. Who do you want to put in there? The most disappointing recruit TCU's ever had.
I believe that Garrett Hayes has a competitive disposition problem. Let the reader understand.
Do you want to put in Ezra Dotson Oyatade? Who do you want to put in?
I think this not Willis Patrick. Who's the other guy? Give me a second. I'm confusing names. No, I do not believe
I know.
Force.
There's Marcus Williams. There's Gannon Gobert. Michael.
Oh, Deary, the Minnesota, or excuse me, the Maryland guy. I was trying to think of the Minnesota guys. Like, who is it? But that's the wide receiver. Colton Deary seems like a guy transfer from Maryland. Seems like a guy who could play and fill one of those IOL spots. It's last year they weren't super talented across it, but they had a lot of experience.
Wait a minute. TCU is a guy on their offensive line named Robbie Rochester.
Awesome.
It's a fake name.
Awesome.
It's not a real person. All right, go ahead.
You tell me who's going to play with Ricker at offensive line and like this still having the remnants of Jared Anderson. I have no idea what this is going to look like. It's going to be a bad unit. It's going to be a rough unit. It's going to be the limiting factor of the offense, which is hard because TCU fans have seen that for a while. And last year it wasn't the case. And this year it might be the case again. An unnamed source told me that like it has the potential to look not just like Jared Anderson is coaching the offensive line, but that he is in fact playing on the offensive line. So we'll see how it pans out. I'm pretty low on this unit, Grant. I have a 9 out of 15 here.
Okay. I have a 10 out of 15 just because I think the returning starters offer some stability, even if one of them is player X. I think
you could do worse than Coker Coleman at tackle. I think you could.
You absolutely could. They're going to have to find interior linemen. John Lands is fine. He's a fine lineman. It's just the other two spots worry me. I don't know. Maybe Willis Patrick turns out cool. He's 6'4", 347. Just put him up there and have him
big man.
Away.
Yeah, man.
Big man.
Zone blocking, dude. Just fall the right way.
Right, exactly.
It's easy.
Anyone can do it. Parker at defensive coordinator at.
Well, what do you have? What do you have the offense out of 50?
Oh, sorry. Out of 50, I have them at a 33.
I have 37, so I'm a little higher on them than you.
You were higher on the running back and wide receiver.
Yeah, and so that makes them the highest out of the three offenses we've done. So I had 36 for Kansas, 32 for Iowa State, 37 for TCU.
Yeah, I had 36 for Kansas, 29 for Iowa State, and 33 for TCU. So mid pack, but certainly with room to grow, especially at the running back room. If that develops, I think there's a lot of potential there. Moving to the defense, because we are already an hour and 3 minutes into this. Joe Gillespie is the defensive coordinator, 3-5, right? So reliance on strong defensive backfield and roving linebackers. Full stop. You got to have a defensive backfield that can tackle. That's the key to this defense. The questions, you're largely starting over at defensive line. And also, who's your number 2 cornerback? We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. So from a philosophical sense, if I'm running this offense, right, and I had to start over from one position, this defense, and I have to start over here, I would much rather have an inexperienced defensive line and have a Mark Perry, a Millard Bradford, a Josh Newton, a Bud Clark, even a Johnny Hodges, if you will, and a Jamoy Hodge. I would much rather be in this situation than having a super badass defensive line and nobody in the backfield. So it's not great. Agree. The turnover is rough. You can't just replace a D Winters, but I think this is a better problem.
I 100% agree. Which is why, like, we fill out the sheet and I'm entering key questions. It's okay. You're starting over defensive line, but the other questions are who's your number 2 corner, and I think TCU has an answer for that. And then can Josh Newton, Abe Kamara, et al. Make the leap from very good to great? Right.
I think there's
not a bad problem to have.
Yeah, but I think there's questions on all 3 of those. One, can Josh Newton be the number 1 cornerback instead of an amazing number 2?
I think he can. We'll get to that.
Can Abe Kamara open his eyes when he tackles?
I hope he doesn't, because it's very
because as his role expands, Grant, he's got to be less of that. Just like I'm swooping and doing like Leroy Jenkins, right? He can't do that every time. And so I think that's pretty important to know. And then who's the third one you asked about?
That was it. Just number 2 corner.
Yeah, those 2, I think. And like Mark Perry's going to be the anchor, but like, what if I'm keyed in on Mark Perry and I know what TC, like now I have some film, me being the opponent. I've got some film and I've seen Jamoy Hodge get blown out of the hole and Mark Perry over pursue on a counter and Michigan run for 70 yards, right? Like I've seen that. How can TCU knows that people have seen that. How can they address that?
Yeah. So let's go unit by unit. Defensive line.
Can I read defensive stats? I haven't read any defensive stats. I'm sorry. Let me pull this. Good. Well, do I have those up? Yeah, here we go. 60th in EPA per pass, 42nd in EPA per rush, 50th on early downs EPA, 35th in 3rd and 4th down success. So a little bit better on their 3rd and 4th down success than they were. EPA per play on early downs, 47th in net points per drive, 41st in points per quality possession, allowing 3.78. And so a defense that like consistently did enough. Like one facet of this unit could play an excellent game and the other half could just be okay. And that's all they needed last year.
Yeah. I think this defense was pretty impressive in terms of switching schemes, right? So Joe Gillespie's first year at Fort Worth, after the Patterson 4-2-5 that had been ingrained in everyone's memories for forever, I was impressed by this defense. They weren't always the most disciplined, but they tackled their ass off and made a lot of good plays.
And often their opponent's ass off.
Yes.
In terms of just sheer physicality. Yeah.
Very physical defense. So looking at the defensive line, this is the unit I have the most questions about. Dylan Horton is gone, got drafted. Good for him. Very sick.
Dude. Shout out and signed. Yeah. Got paid. Awesome. Yes, American dream right there, man. Awesome.
100%. Terrell Cooper also was sneaky good, and he's gone too. Demotic Williams needs to take the leap at defensive tackle. Parker, I have a question for you. 6'2", 320. Does he count as Butterball, or is he too tall?
Dude, he's so athletic, and I think he's too tall.
Okay.
I think the more pertinent question about Dominic Williams is: are we talking about NFL defensive tackle Dominic Williams?
I think
kid was 17 in practice last year.
Yeah,
I think, dude, with 2 or 3 more years, like he is special that he came in and took that entire load of this defense and just was able to bear it, because frankly, there wasn't last year and there's not this year anything behind him. I mean, his backup is yet again Sonny Misi. Shout out to the Legacy Career Award, 14 years playing for TCU football, Sonny Misi.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he can play the nose. I think he'll play kind of the soft defensive end tackle kind of a thing. But yeah, so I mean, Williams has to be the guy, and he's the linchpin. And again, this year, I think that's a question about TCU's defense. Is like last year, was he on anyone's radar? No. Now he is. What are they going to do? You know?
Yeah. My question is, who are the edges? Parker, did you know Caleb Fox played 392 snaps last year?
No.
Well, he did. Cole Ellison's not even there anymore.
Also, trying to count how many plays were in like the Colorado and the Tarleton State and the Iowa State game.
I also got to tell you, Parker, as we're recording, Max Doggins just pissed on my carpet.
Dude, roll Tide.
So, Yeah, Cole Ellison's not even there anymore. Like the edges are a complete mystery to me. I don't know who's going to play them. Caleb Fox, I assume, is going to take one of those roles. I don't know who else is going to be there. I'm looking at the roster too. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that we'll see. They rotated a lot during spring game, and it only mattered so much. Like Paul Oyewale is going to be there. I just don't. I don't know. We're going to see who emerges.
Yeah,
a champion will emerge.
They better hope. I have no qualms about nose tackle, and I'm bumping this unit up a couple of points because of it. But I'm marking them down because there's no edge group that I feel confident in. And this is a 10 out of 15 for me, a 66%.
Oh my god! I basically ranked Dominic and then no one else. I went 6 out of 15. I think this is a terrible unit. I think the pass rush is going to be so bad because Dylan Horton was so athletic last year and carried so much. I think,
holy shit,
dude, it's going to be bad. That's better than Kansas. Better than Kansas.
Well, yeah, you had him as a 4, so yeah, that makes sense. To be fair, I had Kansas as a 5. Linebacker group, counterpoint. Hey, man, there's a lot of talent here. This still rules.
There's a lot of theoretical talent here.
All right, look, Chad Banks is back. Marcel Brooks is back. Nnamdi Obiazor transferred from safety to linebacker.
Johnny Hodges back healthy, starting again.
Yeah.
You got Chad Banks, you got Marcel Brooks, you got Thomas Armstrong, whose name we heard a lot last year, but then he got hurt. It'll be deeper in terms of like guys you would be okay with playing than it was last year. But like, how do you replace D Winters on this offense, man? Sure. Like, who's going to come in and just be like, yeah, I'm going to take that role? D Winters last year, second most snaps, second most pressures at 30. In terms of tackles, had the second most at 65. I mean, just a whole ton there. The third most, second, tied with Jamoy Hodge with tackles. Just a super big piece of your offense or defense rather, and a super experienced guy. And so I think that when I knock them away from what I think their ceiling could be, I have them, just getting this out of the table, I have them at an 8 out of 9, which is kind of like the same thing as the running back group. I think they're going to be fine. But because they're so inexperienced, I just don't know how they're going to be able to, at that key position, at that kind of rover prowler position that Winters played last year. I just don't know how that's going to hold up.
Winters is obviously the big departure, but I have this unit as a 9 out of 10. I think there's just too much talent, too much athleticism for this to be a group that doesn't excel. Point blank, I think it's going to be great.
But I think that if you look at like defense is a series of interdependent processes, right? Like these things all depend on each other and like they all have to go right. Otherwise, if you break the weak link, you're going to give up a big play. If the defensive line is tenuous and the linebackers are tenuous, that's even more tenuous because they're bouncing off each other, right? Like the slack there is pretty.
Yeah, I understand, but I don't think the linebacker, that's just a fundamental disagreement. I don't think the linebacker core is going to be tenuous. I think, yes, D. Winters leaving is bad, but I think there's enough leadership between Hodge and Hodges, the law firm, that they're going to figure it out. I have no qualms.
Can I say I just cheated? I think looking at this, I'm going to drop them to a 7 because I moved up the defensive backs a little bit. I had them rated the same as the defensive backs. I don't like that. I'm going to go 7 out of 10 as my final answer.
Okay, I'm keeping it as a 9. And I spoiler alert, I have the defensive backs as a 9 because Parker. I'm just going to read you a list of names. So first off, TCU loses Travius Hodges Tomlinson, the GOAT. Kudos to him. Noah Daniels, Keon Stewart, and DeArco Perkins McAllister. Stewart and Perkins McAllister transferred.
None of those are real. People.
Not real people. They return Fig Newton, Millard Bradford, Bud Clark Island,
Abe
Kamara, Josh Foster, Mark Perry, so
4 out of
many
5
dudes, many dudes,
certified dudes. Yep, so many dudes. One of the best. Without answering who's playing second quarterback, which I want to hear your thoughts on. Yeah. One of the best defensive backfields in the conference immediately.
Full stop. So you put Newton at CB1, right? Just plug him in terms of THT. Bigger, maybe not as much of a I don't know, Mongoose, just like an aggressive, like, hey, F you guy, but a talented guy and bigger than THT. Bud Clark, Kamara, Perry is a hell of a safety trio. Millard is dude. If you have Millard Bradford as a rotation player, that's insane. Like, he could start on 75% of the teams in the Big 12 conference immediately, and I think he's going to be a rotation guy. If I had to pick a CP2, Avery Helm transferred in from Florida.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
Yeah, started 13 games over 2 seasons at Florida. He's really talented. I love Channing Canada. He was the best cornerback in the JUCO class in 2022. I really want to see him work into the rotation, maybe as kind of the slot corner, things like that. But I think Avery Helm is going to be the number 2 guy opposite Josh Newton. Dude, this unit rules, man.
It's pretty good.
Big fan.
9
out of 10.
It's pretty good.
I'm
going 9 only because the question I already asked, which was, can Newton be number 1? I think we have some uncertainty with that.
Sure.
And then, can we get a little more consistency out of the run defensive guys there? But I think just an excellent unit overall.
Okay. We're going to have some really funny overall rankings. So I have the defense as a 28. You have them as a 22. And I think that's fair. Okay. So overall, however, you have TCU, and so we should do coaching special teams. You have coaching as a 12. I have it as an 11. But
okay.
Yeah. So
I like that. I think their special teams was like boringly fine last year, which is the best you can ask for when you have like a good offense. Like, you just want to be like, let's just don't screw it up. Right.
Yeah. Just don't blow. I mean, Griffin Kell's back and Jordy Sandy's back. Both starters are back at kicker and punter. And
TC created a little havoc and didn't give up a lot of havoc on special teams. I think that's great.
You lose your punt returner. I'm curious who's going to return punts. But
I wonder if they don't give it over to one of the young guys, right?
I would almost like to see JoJo Earl in that role, but that's anyway.
Well,
I don't know if that'll
knees, but yeah.
Well, yeah. So I have TCU at a 72. You have TCU at a 71. For context, you had Iowa State, excuse me, at a 69 and Kansas as a 63. I had Kansas as a 64 and Iowa State as a 59. So, yeah. Do you want to do a quick schedule rundown before we close out today, Parker?
Yeah, let's do it the same way we always do. I'll go to the Google Doc and I guess have we typed it in there? I haven't typed it in there yet.
I have not typed it in there yet. So if you will do it in the Google Doc, I will pull it up.
No, I already have. Look at me. I did it.
No, I did it, asshole. I forgot that I did it. Okay, fine.
Now we have to mark this not safe for kids. Come on, dude.
Come on. All right.
I'm pretty sure I said shit earlier.
I also said shit. Okay. Home for Colorado. I had that as a win. Dion's not going to get that shit going quick enough.
I think that if they played in week 12, I would think differently about this game. But yes, TCU is going to win that game.
Okay. Home for Nicholls State. Shout out to Nicholls State, but I had this as a win.
Do you know Nicholls State's mascot? I don't know. I'm asking off the top of my head.
No, I think it's something with a spear, but I could be wrong.
It's I think they're like a prime example for like a Warhawk or something that used to be a potentially like Native American name, and they've gotten away from that. Yeah.
So you didn't look it up? I mean, golly. All right.
No, here I'm going. Nicholls State football mascot. Colonel Toulouse. So are they the Colonels?
Oh, so
they're the Colonels. Yeah. Look at that.
Troubling considering where they are. Okay.
It's okay. His skin is gray.
I'm blowing past that. At Houston.
They should win that game, I think. I don't know. We'll talk about Houston, but I'm not I'm not the most high on Houston. Yeah.
Lose Clayton soon. They're rebuilding. Home for SMU. I think it's a win because SMU is also losing some people. Yeah,
SMU is going to be a lot, but like I'm not going to predict a loss there. Like I think it'll be closer than any of the other 3 games that they have in non-con, or I guess Houston's conference game. But like, Yeah, I think it'll be closer, but I don't think they'll lose that game. So we're at 4-0 to start.
Yeah, I don't like this already, and especially
Yeah, me
because
neither.
they're going to be 5-0 home for West Virginia because West Virginia stinks, baby.
TCU 1-4 against West Virginia against Neil Brown, right?
Yeah,
1-3,
yeah.
1-4.
I can't tell you. 1-something. They never beat West Virginia. I still have it as a win, but I don't know.
I guess, yeah, I think I got to call it a win.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then they are at Iowa
Dude.
State.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are you kidding me? We're going 6-0.
6-0. Yep.
Holy shit.
All right, I'm calling it now. They're losing to BYU.
Okay, probabilistically, they're gonna lose one of these games. They're not gonna go 7-0.
I know. But every game is a over 50% win. You know what I mean? Like probabilistically, you're right. But
I hate this.
I don't like it either.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta go win. I think they're gonna win. I think they're gonna win against BYU at home.
Okay, I'm calling that a loss.
So, where's the bye? Do we know? I need to look at where the bye is.
The bye is I think it's where is the bye? I think it's late.
It's October 14th, 21, October 7th.
So
14th,
it's between
September.
Kansas State and Tech, October 28th that weekend.
Ooh. Okay. Interesting. Great.
Yeah. Which I don't like, but okay. At Kansas State, I think that's a loss.
Yeah, I'm going loss there.
At Tech, I think that's a loss.
I'm going to call that a loss as well.
Home for Texas, I think that's a loss.
I think that's a loss.
Home for Baylor, this is the one. Literally, if I had to pick a game where I don't know how to call it, this is it. I don't.
If this wasn't between Texas and Oklahoma, I would call it a win. But situationally, I'm calling it a loss. Frick, I hate this.
Okay, I'm calling it a loss as well. And then at Oklahoma, last game of the season, Oklahoma will figure it out. I think it's a loss. So 1,
2, 3, 4, 5.
I have them.
Okay, so you have.
6.
I have 7 and 5. I feel comfortable about that. Yeah.
But losing the last 6 games of the season, you haven't losing the last 5 games of the season.
Yeah.
Wolf.
I don't think they'll go 7 and 5 like this. Like they'll lose Houston and beat Baylor or something.
Sure.
But in terms of just straight win and loss, yeah, I think that 7 and 5 is more likely. Which should be a floor, and that is not as low as a floor as they've had in the past, right?
No, absolutely. But it's still not necessarily a fun.
It's going to be hard for, again, like it is for every fan base when their team is awesome one year and then it's terrible. It's just hard in the Big 12. You develop and you lose talent and you have to rebuild. And it doesn't mean your program's bad. It's not like a referendum on the quality of your program or your coach or whatever. It's this is part of playing in the Big 12 is you don't have the talent level or the talent advantage to sustain this kind of dominance year over year. You've got to build an ebb and flow.
Well said. Parker, are you ready? I have the list. Are you ready to figure out what team we're going to cover next week?
Oh, shoot. Let's go.
I have it. Are you ready? All right.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. BYU.
Oh, sick.
Come on down.
Yeah, very fun. Okay, that'll be really good. I'm gonna have to holler at my friend Ben Cradell over at Salt Lake and ask him some inside info about BYU. That's great. Okay,
yeah, it'll be great. All right. We'll travel to Provo next week. But until then, this has been the Purple Theory Podcast. My name is Grant McGalliard. You can find me on Twitter at Grant McGalliard, spelled like it sounds with all those vowels. He's Parker Fleming. He is at Stats of War. He's doing a lot of really fun things with Sumer Sports. Excuse me, Dr. Parker Fleming. I apologize. Shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Shout out to the Republic of Football Podcast Network. We are proud to be a part of it, and we will see you next week for the BYU Cougars. Adios.
All right.